So today we are also going to see, apart from the way you can innovate and the ways you can actually protect it, we are also going to see the legal repercussions if you're not going to protect it, or even in spite of protection, what can be the other reasons where you should be legally aware of your rights and the ways other can violate them. So let us go. So if you look at the IP, which has been actually protected, even then, it can be used as a leverage for 4 or 5 aspects. In spite of everything, you have to be aware of what is happening and how you have to move forward. Either you wanted to actually undertake the actions on your own, or you want to actually give it to a third party to actually take it forward. So the funding is the first thing what comes on to every innovator's mind. If he's in academia and the academician's first thing is, okay, I have an IP, which is very good, and IP requirements are there in many of the funding schemes that are floated by different ministries. I want to get the best funding possible, and international collaborations based on that, and the publication, yes, that is also in mind, the good peer-reviewed journal with a good score on it, and the monetization, which will also yield you royalty or any sort of a benefit sharing. So as we have heard till now, that it is not easy to actually protect your IP once you have even got the grant of patent through a statute. So the both statutory and non-statutory aspects of IP we have seen. So just because you don't want people to communicate with you, or you don't want to talk about, doesn't mean that you have protected your IP enough. So there are very many ways actually you can think of to keep communicating about your IP that has been protected, still actually protect it also. So it can, the new ideas are proof of concept, technology development, application identification, application development, technology transfer, commercial scale up, and market development, which are the significant steps in any product's life cycle. You may have to face challenges at every step, right from the concept till the market development of the product or the services you want to offer it to the public. So yes, once you have a funding scheme which has actually taken you to the last round, the recommendation of the Apex committee has come that you are going to receive the fund, you feel that yes, you are free, I can practice this patent. We can understand the enthusiasm. So because we have a lot many funds which are sitting over there, which are just for proof of concept, as discovery funds, which can be for the validation and scale up funds with a cap or without a cap. We also have clinical trial funds, even up to 100% of the grant that is involved. But probably the implementation side, what they are looking at as funding agencies is India, not abroad. So if you have a multi-country clinical trial, that means the Indian trial will be funded and not the areas or the sites which are outside India, if it is a government agency which is funding. So we are also looking at technology development and de-risking funds, which may be at a later validation stage, where you also look at translation, where you also have an industrial partner, you have identified them, you can go along with them. We have patent protection funds specifically by many ministries, including the startup and stand-up programs, and also the patent policies of our country, which allow for specific innovations, which are through academia, small-scale industries, and DIPP registered startups to go, and MSME registered companies to go ahead and have some sort of a concessional rate for protecting their IP. We also have technology in licensing funds. These are very specific, which are termed as technology acquisition funds, where you have identified the technology under an international collaboration, and the government of India.
2 to 3 millimeters beyond the margin of the region.
Yeah. Somebody else is talking. Should I continue?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. Okay. The market entry funds are very specific product development funds, which are also given by certain, ministries, including BIRAC, which is under DBT, for actually giving the product to an industry till the last stage, pre-commercialization, validation, and scaling up, so that they can be market ready when you go for the expansion funds. So whatever may be the nature of the funds, you have to look at the scheme, what it is specifically, and depending on the scope of the scheme, you have to put your project applications and the scale to which you are looking at, also the synergy between the organizational mandate, the scheme mandate, and the saleability of your project itself, where you have seen that the timelines and the deliverables are going to match the scheme mandates. So if these things are put in place, probably you will have a brighter chance for the funding organization to pick your projects. So definitely, as a lawyer, I have been looked, in certain way by the people who say that, oh, why the lawyer is there in the beginning itself? They can come at the last stage, as a last stage to protect everything once we scientists decide everything. That's not going to happen. If it is going to be the right way, you have to actually call a lawyer at a stage where you have already started, through the negotiations, as well as through the firming up of your terms and everything, so that, you don't have to miss out any of the legal bottle plates and other things, so that, you can be protected, your IP can be protected, and you will get the maximum benefit out of the sharing of the resources and the commitment made. So yeah, this is a joke where we say 1,000 lawyers chained together and dropped into the ocean. People say, oh, it's a good start. Let us go ahead. Let us have a peace, mental peace, So as we are rightly stating that whether you want to do it in your own setup under the lab to propagate your own IP through your own students, you should have the right people who may be interdisciplinary in nature, because there may be artificial intelligence involved. You should have the right processes where you have to plan and source all the, equipments, maybe common facilities we are looking at, or a core facility, but right work which has to be focused on the right systems where you can actually look into the performance of your own IP happening in your lab. For everything, there has to be also a documentary setup or a template made by you. If you have a student coming in who will be working in a project, already you have a protected IP, please make sure that you also have a template wherein the disclosures and the confidential information safekeeping is also made part of the student undertaking. So these are templates which I have not seen in many labs, but it would be good that if you get a help of a professional and put all these templates in place where a person enters, maybe even a trainee for a 2-month period. So, but then you will have to have these templates and undertakings, so that the lab as a team is not going to exploit one another, but they are going to perform under certain set norms. So if you're actually going for a partnering with an industrial partner or even another academic institute for taking forward your IP, what you have protected, then there has to be a formal or informal. Both ways you can do it. Informally, you can talk to your colleague from a different laboratory or a department and say, okay, let us go ahead. We will put a joint application. We'll get a joint grant. Let us go ahead and make a product. But yes, so this will have more risks. Once there is IP stemming out of the implementation of the project, then both of them will have differences. What is your component? What is my intellectual contribution? This is not right. So this is not the way to share the benefits. So there will be then less certainty and less credibility to the partnership itself. Therefore, it would be always preferable that you have even though if you have an iterative negotiation, you have inter-party problems, you have multi-jurisdiction. But if it is in paper, if it is in writing, two or more parties coming together can have a better understanding on the roles and responsibilities, how to implement the project, how to take ahead the monetization or validation of the IP, and how to find a deliverable that will yield benefit for all of them involved. It's a win-win situation. So definitely when we look at this partnering, there is a conflict. If you look at all this, I have in our study from BIRAC as well as TDB and other government agencies, you have seen 60% of the research funding comes from government sources, 18% from their own university or institutional sources, 10% from private foundations, including international charitable organizations, and 5% from private industry, where you have gone ahead and found an industrial partner. And the industrial partner is sharing the cost of your product development or even the technology development prior to validation. So these are all, the areas where we have to grow more trustful of the industrial environment and find partners who can take us ahead. So the collaboration planning, receipt of funds, intellectual property management of individual collaborations, or even evaluation of individual collaboration results, all depend upon how you can comfortably sit across a table, heart to heart and partner to partner. How can you actually do a formal writing up or firming up of the terms and conditions? So once you do it, beware of side deals. I have also seen academicians who also enter into side deals or side letters once a company comes to them. There will be a standard template for a partnering or a collaboration agreement, and they will do some side letters. They will say, okay, for this specific project, let us go ahead for a specific terms and conditions. But definitely beware, because that is not going to supersede what is the law of the land or what is there already in your pre-existing agreement. So be careful what you are going to actually negotiate and come up with as a written agreement or even side deals with your industry partners. Yes, definitely. I have seen academicians saying that we as academicians don't want profit. We don't want to sell anything. We want to publish. We want to get the fame. We want to get the repute. We want to get the funds for the labs. Yes, definitely that is one area where there is a conflict of interest when you look at it. And we also have a broader mission of development, which is for public use rather than actually for a industry controlled R&D. So the academic liberty or the freedom, that is the pride of all the professors and scientists. So that gets challenged when you look at partnering. So also there is an early stage and closer to market. The fundamental research is the prerogative of an academia, and the closer to market research or validation becomes an industry activity. And we have grants on one side where you just want pure money flowing in for research purpose only, and also the profits which is getting eyed by the industry partner. We also have increased commercialization of university research agenda as a criticism coming from different parts, where they say, if you are going to handshake with an industry, that means you are going to deviate from your not-for-profit or altruistic mandate of doing only the research for public good. So, and you will get distracted from the basic research. So in spite of all the conflicts, I have seen that in the present stage, people have been coming up with different partnerships, which is also good. We cannot stay away in silos and expect that things are going to be good and the product will reach the market. Even for people to get access to the technology, what you find as the best glowing technology, you should have to partner with an industry mind. You don't have, I have seen in scientists are very good administrators, very good scientists. We are problem solvers, but definitely we are not sellers. We are not going to do the sort of a lobbying which is required for taking it forward before the market. So let us leave it up to the industry. We can partner with them and we can see the light of the day. So as I rightly said, because of all these conflicts, we see industry and academia as oil and water. But when you actually mix it up with them, you can see a lot of colors flowing in, a lot of patterns coming in. So which will be good for both of us, right? So as a whole or as a part of the patent, both can be actually transferred to other parties. It can be a property in true sense where you can actually give it to your children through lost will. As judgment, you can actually put it as a security and collateral for your loans. So these are exactly the properties what you're looking at when you look at an immovable property or a movable property, as we know in common parlance, like a land or a jewel. So intellectual property is almost an asset which may not be physical in nature, but definitely it will have both the properties of either a movable or an immovable, where we are looking at transferability, transactions, and the legal value to it. So there are differences, the way you can give it up to the third parties, because you are the owner, you are the inventor, you are the applicant. So both the terms determine that you have some stake in the invention that you have made as an academician or a professor. We can either license it or you can actually give the entire patent on assignment. The assignment means that definitely you are giving away your ownership. There is a transfer which is irrevocable or irreversible, and the new assignee becomes the owner of the patent or the IP. So we have to be careful with these terms of licensing or assignment. If it is just a license, that means you are going to actually dole out a part of the patent rights, or you are going to give the entire patent right on a non-exclusive basis or exclusive basis. That is when the creativity gets translated into an access or opportunity. So once these processes are in place, there are also stamp duties like we do for property transactions. We also have registration processes. And if it is going to be a biomaterial, all these biomaterials have to be deposited at International Deposit Authority also, which is IDA, and under the Biological Diversity Act of 2002. So these are all very few things, because we also are coming up with the stem cell area where we think there is a lot of potential. Also, there are a lot of risks, because there is a difference between stem cell research and stem cell therapy. We cannot call it a therapy unless it has been established that it is out of risk, or at least we know the risks which are involved, and we can actually enable the patient to give an informed consent on it. So definitely, if we look at how people actually take it forward, the companies take it forward, how new companies get formed using an IP, you see the timing is great. Yes, you have a new IP, you have seen that this is the need of the hour, and you have a demand in the market. The timing is great, which constitute 40%, 42% for it to be a winner. And team or execution is 32%, where you have the right team, where you have already having partnering going on. And the idea itself, which is an outlier that nobody else has thought of it, is 28% of factor for becoming successful. The business model, where you look at an approach globally or an inner inland market, or how you want to go about it, 24%. And funding is definitely there, but it is not a very significant factor for a startup or a spin-off or a faculty-driven enterprise to become successful. All of this will be possible only you have the first winner, which is the legal support. So yes, we may be a nuisance, but we are the needed nuisance, essential nuisance. Yes, at all timing, on all the steps, whether it may be pre-patent grant or the post-patent grant, you need legal support so that you protect yourself, your IP, and you don't step on the toes, as rightly Dr. Chitra said, and you can actually save yourself from any sort of a legal action or claims against you. So this is where we say, as a fraternity, we say we don't have to be victim of bright, shiny object syndrome. I've seen this with many of the scientists who think this is my best baby. This innovation is the best I have got, and no other scientist has got this. So this best baby syndrome, or the bright, shiny object syndrome, actually can weaken you. It may be your strength when you want to convince others that, yes, give me the fund because this innovation is good. It may also be your weak point, because you will never be able to accept the criticism of the other well-wishers who want to see that this product, when it wants to go to the market, there are certain areas you have to work from now. These are the areas you need addressing. So we have to be very careful as innovators to not become a victim of BSOS. So when we talk about the legal arrangement or the legal support, starting from the day you want to communicate with any other third party, the legal support has to be there, where we call it as a non-disclosure agreement for confidential information. Or you want to have a student in your lab, you have to have a lab undertaking. If you want actually to sit across the table, on the end of that very day, put a term sheet on paper, just a pointers that you accepted this, we discussed this is what we want, these are the things which we will discuss in future. So this is called a term sheet. It is a very sort of an informal firming up of the aspects what you have discussed with your partner. And the letter of intent, if you have further industry coming up and they say, yes, we want to partner with you, or the memorandum of understanding, here, I want to see that you understand the difference between memorandum of agreement and memorandum of understanding. The agreement means it has a legal binding component. Understanding is an umbrella understanding between two parties where we want to collaborate in a certain area, do certain activities, see where it goes. But then agreement means you have actually pictured what is the role and responsibility of both the parties. You have everything in place. You have committed your resources. You know what is the funding component. You know the budget specifications. You have got it actually. What is the IP governance will be there. If there is going to be a commercialization, what will be the benefit sharing? What will be the royalty payments? So how this will end, or how it will terminate or foreclose, and the dispute resolution. So all this, if you have thought out, that is agreement. Whether it may be collaborative agreement, whether it may be resource sharing agreement, licensing agreement, consultancy agreement, invention assignment agreement, joint contribution agreement, benefit sharing agreement, outsourcing, contract research agreements. Here in the contract research agreement is also called outsourcing, where you do not have to worry about any sharing of your data or sharing of your intellectual contribution, because it is like a person is going to give you services, gets the payment, and gives back the data to you or the results to you. So this is the area where you have to be careful that there you should not lose any of your rights. And we also have deeds. The deeds may be hypothecation deeds, deeds may be even mortgage deeds of your IP, collateral deeds of your IP for getting a support, or even commitment deeds for public procurement, etc., based on the mission under which you are going to get the funding. Definitely, there will be a separate funding agreement also. If it is grant, soft loan, doesn't matter. You will have an agreement which you will sign the dotted line. And I would request all the scientists, though you say it is a legal document, you please read the terms before entering or signing those. Awareness is the key, and ignorance cannot be an excuse. This has been told and told till the time we actually, we have lost the brains on that, but then people have been careless. So I will talk about humanitarian commitment and access agreements also in a little while. So when we look at as a grant giving organization like BIRAC, where I have worked, TDB, ICMR, we look at both the things, technical as well as the financial aspect of a project. When it is projected, the due diligence will cover both the areas. What is the pre-existing IP? What is the background IP? What is the in-house strength? How are they going to strategize the implementation of the project? And once the funding goes, then how are they going to utilize? How are they going to give the statement of accounts? How they will protect the project IP? How they will acknowledge the grant? This may sound simple, but you have to acknowledge the grant. The acknowledgement does not mean endorsement by the funding company. Acknowledgement that this product has been funded by DBT does not mean the liability of the product or manufacturing anything will rest upon DBT. Nothing goes to DBT, no liability goes to DBT. It will still be with the innovator or the manufacturer. So acknowledgement also comes with a legal disclaimer. So the royalty, if they want, the funding agency itself wants, that will be well above the royalty the academia will get from the industry partner on sales of the product. We have to be very careful on these aspects so that we have an understanding when we go for partnering. So this I have already told you. So even then, no need to actually note them down, but I have just put in the elements of an agreement. When you want, it will involve not only the technical aspects, the financial aspects, but also the boilerplates, which will be like negotiable clauses on damages, on force majeure, that which goes beyond the control of the performers, whether it may be the transferor or the transferee, licensor or the licensee, collaborating institute or the collaborating industry. So these are things where we describe that the interactions or a relationship or a partnership, there are definitely challenges. So we have to have the perspective to see that everything is taken care through the legal arrangement, what we can put. It may be contractual, it may be non-contractual, it may be a gentleman handshake, but something should be on writing, at least as a commitment letter from both the sides. Please don't hesitate from getting them in writing. It is not that I know the professor, I know him, the reputation is so high, that lab is going to perform for me. Please don't do that. It is not going to be healthy always, whether you are there in the seat or not. This has to happen. The implementation has to go on. The funding agency will want to see the contingency plans put in place and the risk being averted by putting the arrangements in place. So please be careful and be reasonable. And I think in these days, present days, people will not hesitate to bring something in writing also. Because I have seen that 60% of the scientists in our survey do not have any engagement with the industry. They hesitate a lot. So please don't hesitate. Probably you will have to find someone who is having interdisciplinary knowledge. Dr. Will Pandan being, IPR in charge. So people who have touched upon the legal side and then walked back, so they can even give the confidence to the other scientists, stating that, yes, you can be there successfully, you can enter, and like Abhimanyu, you need not be massacred. You can actually come out from that chakra also. So that is very good that, people should have the trust among the partnering industries and go ahead with the written agreements. Definitely devil lies in the details, and you have to organize the thinking. I know you take 1 or 2 confident days when you want to go on the table and bring the industry partner, and you tackle all the communication issues. Don't wait for them to communicate. There is no ego involved. There is no academic ego or an industrial humility. There is nothing like that. You set the expectations clear so that both the partners have their says well before the agreements are put in place. That's why I say there is a lay perspective, how you look at it, and a lawyerly perspective. So lawyerly perspective sees that even if it sounds stupid, please put that as a clause in your agreement. So coming together is just a beginning. Keeping together is a progress, and working together will only bring you success. So don't worry about these Latin terms that lawyers fancily put before the doctors. Don't worry about them. Whatever it is, they are mainly based on logistic legal principles and rules of interpretations. If you look at the judgments, you will see that as a lay person also, you can see that when the facts are in this given set, then you also expect deliverables of judgment in this given set. So there is a logic behind everything. Law is not so complex. You can always embrace it to that extent so that you will get your protection. When we are looking at the technology management, the Association of University Technology Managers give 9 principles which the universities and the academia should be aware of. They go partnering. They say universities should reserve the right to practice. They should not give exclusive license. Even if they want to give exclusive license, it should be structured in a way so that it will not, the entire patent will not lose the non-exclusivity. They want to minimize the licensing of the future improvement. Don't actually make a commitment that the future improvement will not, or will also be automatically becoming part of the license. Don't do that. Maybe a later agreement will be a better option then. Manage technology transfer related conflicts of interest, including dispute resolution, alternate dispute resolutions like mediation or even arbitration, which is very, nowadays internationally, they are all well accepted as a dispute resolution mechanism, binding on the parties, and it would be less expensive and probably not so much draggy as we do in our civil or criminal suits, civil suits or criminal action suits, where we have, we have to go before the court of law, and the criminal actions go on for years and years. And police involvement, which is probably a deterrent if you look at scientists and their way of looking at way of things moving forward. So the enforcement action, therefore, should be carefully considered. And if we are looking at international partners, please be mindful of export regulations, because the export regulations offer an exclusion to fundamental research projects or fundamental technologies. But if you lose this, that means you will be treated as a commercial product. You will be amenable to customs, duties, all those GSTs, everything. So be careful and mindful of export regulations when you have international partners. If you have implications, you will have a lot of implications when you work with patent aggregators. Patent aggregators are those industry partners who want to have related patents in a bouquet form with them exclusively, so that when they want to, launch a project, it will be their own domain. Nobody can challenge them. But there are 2 types of patent aggregators. You can see them as patent trolls, which is very negative, because they are not aggregating the patent for goodness sake. They are doing it because they are on the watch out for other scientists, other industries to violate the patent so that they can bring legal action on them. We also have value addition patent aggregators. They are good. The technology flipping should be avoided. And if there is a proprietary information involved, please be sure that you reserve the right to practice and fundamental research so that you get all the statutory exemptions. There is restricted party screening that is very important, because if you're going to have a partner from China, Pakistan, or other areas where you see that there is a national or a UN blacklisted country. So all these things also you have to be mindful, because those said and done, you may be an individual institute and an independent scientist, but the international scenarios do make a lot of difference when it comes for technology transfer, sharing of resources, and collaborative research. And side deals, I have already told, which you have to be very careful. Oh, definitely, Dr. Velpandian also touched upon the subject. The common man is always on the watch. Though he is very silent, he wants something back. He doesn't demand it in open manner, but yes. And the funding agencies nowadays are also very much aware of this sort of an giving back to the society. You will find clauses in Bill and Melinda Gates, sort of a funding agreement, welcome trust agreement, joint Indo-Finland agreements called as global access and humanitarian license. There will be supply commitment for developing countries. There will be affordable pricing for India market. So these all things are the clauses. Now government is thinking, because if there is a public funding involved and the product is getting developed through public funding, that means the public at large should have some sort of a leverage, because the cost of production or manufacture has been taken care by the government to a certain extent in the life cycle of from the concept to the market. So these are areas you have to be very careful when you have a funding agreement. You have to actually look into these clauses, because when you look into a license agreement for your product, these commitments should become in a part of those future agreements also. Unless those future agreements carry this provision, you will never be able to keep up with the commitment. So we have to be very careful on that front. These are areas where, I want to just touch upon the the Bayh-Dole Act or the compulsory licensing or march-in rights, which has come up in a big way, because the government sees that once I have funded the project and I have funded the research, the development or the results of the research should also belong to the government. So there has to be some sort of a march-in rights where I see that the funded academia or industry is not commercializing the results of the project, or I at least have a royalty-free right in the patents so that I can do it for public interest in my own country at least. So US has got this Bayh-Dole Act, under which it has both the components, royalty-free right as well as march-in rights in the patents of the funded NIH mainly. And we also in our country in 2008, we took up a bill which said that the protection and utilization of public funding will be governed by the Indian government. So that bill has not seen the light of the day. It is still with the standing committee of the parliament, which is actually discussing it again and again, how to take care of Indian scenario, how to adopt it in a given set of criminal and civil rights, what are already existing along the land. So when you look at these march-in rights and compulsory licensing, even though it is by government, it can be done only in certain circumstances like public interest, when there is a breach of law, when there has to be a price control to make the thing affordable for the public, maybe an anti-cancer drug or a rare disease drug, or insufficient working of IP, which denotes that the industry having the patent has not commercialized it for India, for Indian market. And the dependent IP means there is an Indian IP which is available for Indian market, but without this IP, which is going to be the platform IP, there cannot be commercialization. So all these scenarios with adequate sort of an individual merits of the case, the government can look for a non-exclusive, limited scope, limited duration, non-assignable march-in rights or compulsory licensing. So compulsory licensing also means the payment will be done by the licensee to the licensor as it is done in a normal scenario. We have 3 cases. Only one has been given under compulsory licensing, Bayer's Nexavar to Natco Pharma, and both rejections in our country itself after the first grant were for Spirisil as well as Saxagliptin. So you see that it is very sparingly used. Compulsory licensing is a provision which is very sparingly used, but beware that if you license out the product doesn't mean these cannot kick in. Even if you license, the licensee will be amenable for the government laws, and therefore this march-in rights or compulsory licensing will become applicable on them also. We are also ecosystem where all these innovators can go and have their own startups, whether it is an incubator setup or an accelerator setup. AIIMS has got its own incubator setup. You have accelerators with other institutes, government institutes. So if you look at the meaning of incubator and accelerator, I just probably almost
Manu, can you sum up, please?
To give this sort of an idea to you, because these are all the terms you will hear from funding organization, where you have to be an incubator or you have to become part of accelerator to get fund. So beware of all these terms where you have an idea and you can actually grow along with the setup, which is based on common facilities and amenities.
Dr. Banu, can you sum up, please?
Yeah, this is the last slide. Yes, Dr. Rajesh, I'm going to finish it. And because we want to be US $100 billion industry by 2025, our pharma and biotech, we have to be very serious in taking our innovations, forward and commercializing them. Thank you. I know I took a little bit of time, but I don't get much opportunity to discuss with scientists. I think this sharing of information will be good for each one of you. Thank you very much.